Hello, everyone. This is Dennis Schultz. I am the Executive Director for the Blacks in Technology Foundation. If you're not familiar with Blacks in Technology, we are the largest nonprofit community dedicated to the advancement and promotion of people of African descent in tech. Tonight, we're going to be talking about breaking the tinted ceiling in tech. I have a phenomenal group of women entrepreneurs and executives, and will be hosted by Kunbi. And Kunbi, if you mind introducing yourself and the team.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Kunbi Tinuoye, and I'm the CEO and founder of UrbanGeekz, an African-American Latinx multicultural news platform focused on technology, business, science, and entrepreneurship. I'm extremely honored today to be moderating the Breaking Tinted Ceiling in Tech panel discussion by the Blacks in Technology Foundation with myself and three other amazing female leaders in the tech industry, Dawn, Michelle, and Nikki. So I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves. So first up, I'm going to ask everyone, introduce yourselves and just give us a quick overview of what you do. And I'll start with you, Dawn.
We're all like, who's going to go first? I'm Dawn Dickson. I am a serial entrepreneur and an inventor. I'm the founder and CEO of PopCom, the founder of Flat Out Appeals, and the founder of D1 Consulting Group.
Thank you so much. And Nikki?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nikki Allen, and I'm the SVP of Technology at Kohl's. I've had about a strong 90 days at Kohl's. Before that, I had a nearly 20-year career at Boeing in aerospace. So I like to say I went from planes to pants, and I'm happy to be here today.
And Michelle?
Hi, my name is Michelle Grover. I was a former SVP of technology for a company called Concur, which is also part of SAP. And I am now the CIO of a company called Twilio.
Thank you so much. So the first question I want to ask is, all of you are female senior executives in the technology industry. What are some of the things that have helped you achieve this level of success? And I'll start off with you, Nikki.
Sure. I could go on and on, so I'll keep a short list, but it really comes down to grit and perseverance. But I'll say I combine that grit and that perseverance with this insatiable appetite to understand the business. Being a technologist is foundational to what I do in my discipline, but understanding how to leverage technology to enable business outcomes is so important. And then speaking of outcomes, you have to have an outcome mindset. And I think that's one of the things that's been really helpful for me in my career is understanding it's not about output, right? Delivering things. It's about outcome and enabling organizations to be successful. And then I would say what's been most important is a relentless focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and making sure that I show up as a leader who's authentic and that I create environments for people around me to feel like they can show up as their authentic selves as well.
Thank you so much. Michelle?
So for me, I think it's a couple of things. One is actually, for lack of a better term, finding the right person to help mentor and sponsor you kind of all along. I'm almost 50, so I have been doing this for a very long time, and I am always the only with whatever you want to put in and around that. And so part of that is just the comfort of going in and saying, what does somebody else know that I don't know, and asking for help. A lot of times people will help you if you actually ask. And then just the comfort level with saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. You will find that a lot of times you sit in a room full of people and people are nodding, and I look around and I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about. And you go to say that, and then everybody's like, oh, well, yeah. Like there is something to be said for saying, I don't understand. Can somebody explain this and walk through it for me? And what you'll find is a lot of times, you're not the only one. But the fact that you did that, now you can have a powerful discussion, a conversation. You can actually, understand what you're trying to get to, and you can help facilitate the room around that. So just always being comfortable with saying, I don't know something. I'm okay with not knowing something. I can't know everything. And asking for help has actually served me pretty well.
And Michelle, I'm going to ask you, what you mentioned, you talked about sponsors and mentors. Have you got any tips on how to actually get that?
Yeah, so I talk about this one. So, sponsors are interesting because you really want those folks that I always say they have to be someone that actually has the authority and the ability to actually do something for you, to actually be able to, they have that seat at the table. They're not looking for the seat at the table. So they can say, hey, this is the right person for that. Sponsors, sometimes, so my girlfriends and I argue this periodically, whether you can ask someone to sponsor you. I have actually had that happen where I have asked people, I've been asked, but what I will say is it's not free. If I give my time and my the effort to sponsor somebody, I expect to see certain things from an individual so that when I'm sponsoring them, I'm putting my best foot forward, but I expect them to be putting their best foot forward too. And so I've been fortunate in that even when I've had mentors, it was reciprocal. They got something from me as well. I got something from them, but you also have to put the effort in and listen and hear. I've had people say, sponsor me, and never come back and say anything else or do any of the 5 things I asked them to do. And so my conscience is clear. I've done everything I can. That's where we land. So just being able to speak to them and then pay attention and actually prove action points around it is what's important.
And Vaughan, I want to ask you, because you're a trailblazer, so I'm really interested in your response here. What's helped you achieve the level of success that you've actually had now?
I definitely echo what these ladies said. The first thing I was thinking was just grit, tenacity, you know, never giving up, having a mindset that you're not going to give up, having the mindset that you are confident to be in a room where no one looks like you. And people have had very little experience with someone that looks like you, but still being confident and really feeling like, you know, I'm representing, you know, the demographic that of Black women. So, and then also I was going to say mentors. You know, I've done a lot of things in my career, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without people to coach me through it and guide me. I have a mentor or advisor for every single area of my business and even my life. You know, I have a life coach, I have an executive coach, I have a spiritual advisor, and I have mentors and advisors for every single part of my business to help fill in those gaps. Because when you're, you know, an executive, there's so many things that you have to do, and everything that's your area of expertise or even passion. But having someone there to coach you is definitely critical.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And actually, I've just recently been working with a business coach, and what you're saying is so true. You need someone to guide you through all these steps. So I'll ask the question, and I'll just, so do you have any tips or advice or strategies for our audience to help them become more effective leaders? So Nikki, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so I love this question. And this has evolved for me over time throughout my own career, but there's something I learned a few years ago, which is a really good acronym for how I kind of pull it all together. And it's a simple acronym, it's PIE, P-I-E. The P stands for performance, right? Performance is table stakes. As a leader, having strong technical skills and business acumen is table stakes. As an employee, it is table stakes. So performance is expected, that gets rewarded in different ways. For some people, it's a paycheck. For others, maybe who are entrepreneurs, it's revenue or growth. But performance is what you have to do to earn your right to be there every day. But that alone is not enough to warrant promotion or to warrant growth. So then comes the I, which is the image, right? How do you show up as you're performing? Are you curious? Are you open to new ways of thinking? Or are you just dead set on your way is the way it has to be? Do you inspire other people? Do you create inclusive environments so that people feel valued when they're part of your team? When you interact with people, is it just transactional? Does it always feel like you want something from them? Or are you truly trying to foster relationships? Your executive presence, right? Do you show up as someone who can command the room and influence others? If not, are you aware of that, and are you working towards it? And then most importantly, back to my original point, are you authentic? So image really matters, and how you show up really matters. So the P is performance, the I is image, and lastly, the E is for exposure. So if you're performing at or above expectations, and you're showing up as a strong leader and a leader who has potential to do even more, what does your impact look like? In other words, who knows about it, right? Who knows about your contributions? Who knows what value you're adding? Who knows what potential you have? And not only who knows about you and your personal sort of PR campaign, but how are you helping others, right? How are you exposing others to your lessons learned and your subject matter expertise? So exposure is a two-way exercise, but it's really, really important as you think about continuing to develop as a leader. So it's that simple. PIE, performance, image, and exposure. Simple reminder that leadership is a holistic approach. It is not one thing.
Absolutely. I love that acronym. Dawn, have you got anything to add with that?
I love acronym too, and I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
Hi. But for me, speaking as someone that's an entrepreneur, started my own company, so it was a time when I was a team of one, you know, and I had to build a team and really develop my leadership skills. I will say just tips for people on here that are entrepreneurs or, you know, they're not within a corporate structure. But very much it's important to focus on the company culture. So when it was just me, I thought, when I worked in a corporate environment, what is my ideal company to work for? What is that culture like? How do they treat me? How does my boss treat me? What are our policies like? You know, how do I feel? What is the, you know, open door policy, even though we're, you know, at shared tables and now in virtual? I mean, how approachable would I want my boss to be? And then I built that organization and I created the company that was my dream company to work for. And I thought about how I felt when I was, you know, working for other people and how they may have treated me. So I created a culture book, and we really just focus on culture in our hiring, and everyone on the team, all of us are leaders. We all have accountability. And so, you know, it's also comes into delegating and giving people ownership of making them feel a part of something, leading by not just dictating, but leading by really having a horizontal hierarchy there.
I love that. It's amazing. Michelle, do you have anything to add?
And what Dawn said is something that I think a lot of times when new leaders come in that they forget, and a large part of what you do is enabling your team. What a lot of folks will ask when they're talking about climbing the ladder is, so what do I do? And I say, do you need to do that? Or why can't your team do that? Why isn't there somebody on the team? Because there is a balance of, do you trust the folks that you have? If the answer is no, then you figure out how to manage the organization the way you see fit. But if you do trust them, then treat them like you trust them, which means they may not do everything the way you do it, but they will do it well, and they will do it better in a lot of cases because you are going to be short-sighted in some of these respects. That's just normal. But enabling, a large part of leading is actually enabling folks and trusting them and saying, you got this. Let me know if you need cover, but I think you can do this, and letting them go ahead and work towards it.
Thank you so much. Brilliant
Hey,
response.
Kunbi, can I just add on that point? I love the points you guys made. And Michelle, to that point, and it's around outcomes too, right? If you enable your team by we align on an outcome, but how you get there is up to you, right? And the point of me being a leader is to hire you for that expertise, is to bring you on board to unleash that, right? So if I'm sitting there, what I always say is joysticking. If I'm sitting there joysticking your every move and telling you what the output needs to be, you never really get to utilize that creativity and that potential that I brought you on board for in the first place. So I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find as well, even from my own personal experience, that whenever I'm micromanaged, I underperform. When people leave you that space to actually do the best that you can do, you actually tend to do really well. So another question now, obviously all women in, you know, positions of power. How do you all deal with situations when where you're being undermined or not taken seriously? Because I know from my personal experience that every single one of you must have encountered this. So how do you deal with that? And I mean, I'll start with you, Dawn.
I was thinking of what can I say? Wow, I can't think of it. I cannot think of an exact situation where I was undermined because, you know, I'm the CEO and I don't have a team like that. Again, it goes back to hiring for culture. We have a very open communication. Everyone feels that they're equally as important, or their views are worthwhile to share. So I haven't experienced that in my 20 years of being an entrepreneur from within my team. Now, I can definitely think of times where I've not been taken seriously in the investor environment, or in certain rooms and events and conferences that were really catered towards, you know, white men in tech. But that's changed. I've been in tech for 20 years. So as we see, there's been a significant shift in just representation in general. So I probably am the best one to answer this question, but I can imagine in the corporate environment, these ladies have more things to share than I do.
Absolutely. I know in corporate it's completely different. So Michelle, can you answer that question, you know, from a corporate perspective?
Sure. So yes, of course it happens. It hasn't happened in a pretty decent clip, actually, believe it or not. I kind of am what I am at this point in my life. So I go in the way I am, and I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to the other. But I will give an example. I have had the point, especially because I'm a software engineer, and I usually am a lot of times the only woman in the room with architects, other architects. I've been a software architect. So I've been a technologist for a very long time. And I remember sitting in a room once, and we were with our boss, who was the CTO, and all my peers were white men. And they were going on and on. I mean, on and on about something that really did not require this much conversation back and forth. And I was really quiet. And eventually my boss came over. He's like, "So Michelle, you're pretty quiet." I was like, "Oh, well, I was letting them finish their measuring before we actually get into anything that we need to actually talk about." Because literally we talked on and on about something, and we never talked about the actual architecture that we were supposed to talk about in the room. And when everybody quieted down, I said, "We're missing like these three main points. We didn't ask the right questions. We haven't looked at any of this." And it just restructured everybody. And at the end of it, two of my peers came out and they said, "Well, why didn't you say anything?" I said, "Say what? No one was listening." There is a point where it's not worth me even contributing if nobody's listening. And then there's a point where it makes sense to actually get involved. So in those types of situations where everyone just kind of talks, now there are times when I would talk if somebody's talking over me, or I've actually gotten up and walked out of a room before because people kept talking. And I was like, "Well, obviously you don't need me here." Said that, walked out, went on about my business, went back to work. And then we talked about it later when everybody could kind of have a conversation. But I just don't, to me, I look at it as, why waste my time? And so I don't waste my time.
Absolutely. And Nikki, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, first I'll say, Michelle, one of the things I used to do, I don't do it as much anymore, but we had a phrase, Elmo, enough, let's move on. And in our virtual world, just hold up a Elmo doll and the camera like, okay, that's it. Enough, let's move on. So just a quick tidbit there. But I agree. I mean, this happens, I think it doesn't happen as much, but it definitely happens more than we want to acknowledge sometimes. And it's things like discounting contributions or stealing somebody's idea or repackaging what somebody just said, right? Or being excluded from a pivotal business decision or pivotal position that you know is important to help move the company forward. That happens quite a bit. And when I see it happening to others, I try to step in and prevent it. But in my own personal case, the first thing I do is make sure I fine tune my awareness, because there's so much noise all the time. And so you have to make sure, you almost have to recalibrate to say, is this real? Am I misreading a cue, or am I overreacting, or is this actually happening to me, right? And so once you sort of confirm that it's actually taking place, the first thing I do, especially with the idea repackaging, is I will document that it was my idea before the meeting. And then after the meeting, I will regurgitate that was my idea. But I'll invite others to comment or weigh in so that I'm facilitating collaboration, but let it not be lost that it originated in my mind, right? The other thing is, if I notice I'm being excluded from conversations that I know I need to be a part of, or decisions I need to be a part of, I'll find out who was there, and I'll do strategic touch bases with each of them. And I'll try to enroll some of them to say, "Hey, don't you think I should have been there? Or don't you think I should have been a part of this?" And if they agree, then I just ask them to simply tap me when they see that I'm not in the room. Tap me when they see that it's something that's in my space, so that I almost have to enroll like these evangelists to help me get there. And if there's a person who's doing it from a serial sort of intentional perspective, I just have a one-on-one and I call it out. Because the intent is, we got to get away from people being okay with us having seats at tables. We need to be voices of influence at a table. I don't want to be a seat at a table, because there are lots of different seats. There are people who, take notes. There are people who are just there to make sure logistics run okay. That is not my intent. Not knocking anyone who does. That's not what I'm in it for. I'm there to be a voice of influence. And so if I'm not going to be leveraged in that way, then I'm happy to have a conversation about why not.
Thank you so much. So Nikki and Michelle, let's go back to corporate America. Then obviously you've both risen up the ranks in corporate America. Talk to us about the experience, and actually more importantly, talk to us how you've taken control of your careers, how you didn't get lost in the whole system. And I'll start off with you, Michelle.
So I think what's interesting is, and I always talk to people, is there's not a clear path. And I think that's what gets you lost, believe it or not, to some degree. there's the serial path of, well, I should be this, I should be this, I should be this. And I can tell you I pivoted. I was an IC for a long time, and then I would go to a leader, and then I decided I didn't like being a manager anymore, and I go back to an IC. And sometimes I would get bored and want to go to different technology, so I would switch and do that and kind of take on all these different types of roles. And then one day you kind of look up and you're well-rounded. It's a very interesting thing. It wasn't intentional. I can't lie and say, yes, I plotted. Nope. No, I did. One day I was actually sitting somewhere and like, oh, I know the answer to that too. And it's because I had tried other things and did different things. And I think that that's also the fact that I've done a couple of things, gone up as a leader and come back as an IC multiple times, has actually helped a lot, because I've had people and I'm like, I don't want a boss like that. I will not emulate some of these behaviors. And it's a reminder to myself that when I'm talking to people, making sure that I'm always speaking to people with respect, I'm always hearing them out, I'm always listening, I'm always contributing to not just their careers, but what's going on in their life. COVID is rough. Lots of people are dealing with a lot of different things. You know, being Black is rough. Like, there's a lot of things that factor in that, like all these things, and being able to kind of bring that holistic self to work, that is actually really important. And it's actually helped me in becoming a leader, because I can bring all of those things into a variety of the roles that I've had. But the biggest thing I just want people, the path is not a straight path. It's the more you learn in a variety of ways. That doesn't mean that you don't really need to know your craft. You need to know your craft, but also taking on more, saying, I don't know that I need to learn and become better, well-rounded, actually helps you a ton.
Nikki, do you have anything to add?
Well, retweet Michelle, and I'll say, like, your development is a jungle gym. It is not a ladder, right? It's a series of experiences that give you this holistic, like, outcome. It's not, to your point, right, Michelle, it's not, okay, I'll go here and then I'll move to this role and then to this role. And there are times when the lateral role may offer you way more growth and development than trying to move up the hierarchy. So I would say I've always looked at it like that. It is a jungle gym. It is not a ladder. And if the roles you are taking or the opportunities you're pursuing, regardless of the level, if they don't give you this feeling of queasiness in your stomach, like, oh my goodness, can I actually go do this? Then it's not a development role. And it's not even the role you should be pursuing. So always seek to learn more, always seek to get different experiences, hence the jungle gym theory. So
thank you so much for that insight. So Dawn, I said you're a trailblazer earlier, and I'm going to say it again because you are. And, you know, in many ways, you've actually created your own path. Just tell us a little bit about your mission, and most importantly, why you've actually focused on crowdfunding. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So as I said, I've been an entrepreneur, 20 years, and went to school for tech in 2000. And so I've always had a personal mission of increasing just access and awareness of technology, opportunities in technology for people that look like me. And then once I became a tech entrepreneur and raising capital, it was really important to me to give access to early stage investing to my community as well. So in 2013, I became aware of the Jobs Act that was passed in 2012 under the Obama administration that allows essentially anyone to invest in early stage companies. It doesn't have to only be tech companies. This could be basically any type of company that wants to raise capital from, friends, family, and their community. The limit initially was $1,070,000 per 12-month calendar year that you can raise, but now that's been raised to $5 million. And so it was a very early, honestly, when I heard about it, it was like no investors thought it was a good idea, because essentially what it is it's a shift of power. It's a transfer of wealth. So a really quick, 20-second history lesson is in 1933, they passed a law that said you have to be accredited to invest in early stage companies. Now, when I researched how are the wealthiest 1% of people in America, where'd they get that wealth from? It came from entrepreneurship, and it came from inheritance. So, entrepreneurship, investing, and inheritance. And so if we are not allowed to invest, since 1933, you have to be accredited, and the income scale is $200,000 a year as an individual, $300,000 as a married couple. It was the similar scale equivalent back in the 30s, but still at a place where not many people that look like us were able to invest. So they kept us out of these deals. So these are the deals that you can get into that can give you the highest return, the highest yield. These are the deals you get into before the company goes public. Once a company hits the stock market and you see it and goes public, the people have already made their money. They're already wealthy. And then we have to try to go and just grow with it on a stock exchange. But I said, why can't we get access to these deals before they go public? And it's because the law kept us out. That law was in place from 1933 to 2012. So this is the reason why the wealth gap was there, not because of, jobs. We couldn't have land. We couldn't hardly inherit anything. We can't invest in anything. So how are we really going to close that wealth gap? So for me, I said, okay, I'm already taking money from investors. What happens in technology is we see over and over again the same big investors profiting and making a huge return when companies like Uber, go public, and then the same people over and over again are making millions and millions of dollars. But none of us are getting wealthy. The founders aren't getting wealthy, and the teams aren't getting wealthy. It's primarily these same investors. So I really wanted to say, when I exit, I would love to see a lot of people that look like me that are on my cap table, which is who vested in my company, then be able to exit with me. And then I wanted to maintain control of my company and not give up everything for investor dollars. And so under the Jobs Act, I was able to raise money from virtually everyone. I have over 5,000 investors. I've raised about $3 million from crowdfunding. And I was the first female founder to raise $1 million with this law because it's so new. I mean, since me, there's been several others, which that is the point of the work that we all do, is to pave the way for the people that come after us. So I'm just really grateful that I had to take a lot of risk. I made a lot of mistakes and I did, things wrong, but I was an example, and now others don't have to go through what I went through.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like changing the narrative, and you're right. Since you've done that, there have been a lot of other people now, people of color, opting to crowdfund. So talking back to entrepreneurship, what advice would you give aspiring entrepreneurs, or early stage tech founders? And that's for you, Dawn, obviously.
I would definitely say that do the best that you can to bootstrap, self-fund, make money from customers. Just get as much early traction as you can get, even if that means just, getting yourself to the point where you have your business incorporated, you have your website set up, you have an MVP, which is the minimum viable product, you have something to demonstrate, you have done your research about the market, you understand how you're going to grow, you understand your business model, and you have some customers that are either purchasing your product or have indicated that they will purchase your product. The reason why traction is so important is because the earlier you take money, the more expensive it is. So if you take money before you make money, it's going to cost you a lot of money and potentially half of your business or more. So I say, stick it out. I think we're a part of this Shark Tank generation that everybody just sees like this vacuum happen. You go on Shark Tank and the sharks, and it's like, oh, you can just raise money from investors. And that's why it's called Shark Tank. Those terms are ridiculous. Or you'll see somebody like me and say, wow, she's so successful, not realizing I've been working for 20 years because that's what they show. And so it's just important to trust the journey, trust the process. Don't rush to take money from people until you know how you're going to return that money. Investors are not donors. They want that money back 10x, 10x. So before you take it, just really deeply understand your business and your model. That's my advice.
Absolutely. And I'm a big proponent of that. I think the best money is money from customers, revenue. That really is the best money. So Nikki and Michelle, just flipping it now, because you are the corporate duo, what advice would you both give early or mid-career professionals trying to actually move up, get that next promotion or to get that senior level position? And I'll start off with you, Michelle.
Make sure you want it. First of all, I say that I'm actually, one of my big things is a try-buy scenario that we give a lot of the organizations I've been at. Why do they really want that? What do they really think it is? We make them shadow somebody that does the role so they can kind of understand. A lot of times, actually, and this is a good thing to piggyback off with Dawn, a lot of times folks see where you are now, you have no idea what it took. Like I just said, I'm damn near 50 and I'm now CIO. Like that's, it's not like I'm 25 and CIO, right? And some of my male white counterparts have been those things multiple times over at this point, right? And so be sure that it is something that you do want. Make sure that you have the support systems to get you there, which is your leader, other folks in the organization. If you see somebody that's doing something really well, get out there and ask them, but ask for help and don't look so much at other people and say, I want that, unless you understand the trials and tribulations that it took to get there, because it is not going to be simple. You have to really want it to do that. So I'm very, very hard on people when they say this. I'm like, what do you think it is? Explain it to me. What are you going to do to get there? Are you willing to make certain sacrifices? Not a ton, but are you willing to make those? And then are you willing to put aside always being right and always having your hands in the things? But you can't be an effective leader and always have your hands in things. So that's what I say. And then, more importantly, just as we always remind ourselves, listen to others. I'm never going to be too old to listen to anyone. And when I say anyone, I've had interns that I've had come in that I sit and talk with. You can learn from anyone, and you should learn from anyone, and you should listen to all people and hear everything when you are making decisions so that you can make informed decisions. So you have to listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. Nikki?
Yeah, I agree. I think the very first thing is making sure that's what you want. People have a tendency sometimes to look at someone else's career or experiences and say, oh, that's what I want to be. And it's like you get this comparison syndrome. And it's rarely a powerful argument for what you need to become in life. Rarely, right? And so it's kind of take a step back and make sure you understand what that is, so you know that if it's the right fit for you. The other thing I'll say is always make sure that your network knows what you're interested in. Because we make assumptions, and I know I've been guilty of this early in my career too, of thinking someone else knows what's right for me. They'll know. I'll just show up every day and perform, and my manager or my immediate supervisor will know exactly what the next step in my career should be. And I suffered from that because early in my career, I was promoted within 6 months because a manager said, I think you should go do this next. And then I was promoted again in 8 months because another manager said, I think you should go do this next. And I thought, here we go, right? All I have to do is show up and perform. Somebody will watch it. They can act on my behalf. Not realizing that I've been me my whole life and I probably know me better than them, but that's neither here nor there. So this third promotion came. And at the time at Boeing, we had a rule where you had to stay in a role for 12 months. 2 weeks into this role that someone else told me I'd be a good fit for, I hated it. It was a worst experience ever. And I knew 2 weeks in, it was not a good fit. And then I had the memory and the awakening that I had to stay here for 12 months. It was like the world came crashing in. I mean, I had like the cycles of grief, right? And I spent some time going, why would this manager do this to me and set me up, right? And then I realized no one did this to me. I did this to myself because I wasn't intentional about what I wanted. I didn't take the time to put the calories and the energy into defining what was the right fit for me, the right types of roles, the right types of experiences. And it was a good lesson to learn early in my career, and I've been intentional ever since then. So make sure you know, and once you know and you can articulate and define it, make sure everybody in your network knows, whether that's a mentor, a sponsor, a manager. You cannot put your career in somebody else's hand. You got to precision strike that thing. Otherwise, it's just going to end up not getting you where you really want to be.
It's amazing. And I actually like the fact that all of you have mentioned that success is not overnight. It takes time and a lot of grit to actually get there. So
one quick thing, just because this is especially because we have a pretty good audience of women too. Women do this a ton. As a leader who pretty much has like 5 women ever in my 300 people organizations, I don't know why this is true, but we will just do everything and assume somebody's looking. And I spend more of my mentoring conversations. So since I have an audience here, don't do that, y'all. I need you to don't just assume somebody saw you. It's not always malice. Sometimes they're just not looking. It's really not always malice. Sometimes the loudest people talk a lot. I've had more white men in my office showing me technology that's, and I've had women that have done some fantastic, amazing things that I had to go get them and ask why they weren't in my office. And you know what? They looked at me and said, oh, well, we thought it was okay. I was like, dude, your counterpart was in here 5 times showing me something less impressive than you. So don't do that. Like I said, there's not always malice. It is just sometimes you can get lost in it. So that just reminded me, like, I just had that conversation today with somebody. It's like, sometimes you have to say something. I don't mean be loud. Everyone's different. Some people are introverts, very quiet. I appreciate that. But don't assume that all your good work is always seen. Sometimes you have to actually put it out there.
Yep, it's that E in exposure, right, Michelle? You have, who knows? You can be performing and showing up the right way, but who knows?
And I see that a lot. It's amazing, just the differences between men and women when you're in a position, a leadership role, and just working. A lot of my young journalists, just the difference in confidence, and it's not necessarily that the men are better. They just believe in themselves a lot more. It's been a real eye opener for me, actually. So another question I want to ask all of you, and some of you have touched on it, but what are some of the lessons learned? Because I'm sure there have been a lot of lessons learned in this journey. So I'm going to start off with you, Dawn, if that's okay. I'll go straight to you.
I've learned a lot of lessons, a lot of hard lessons, but I'll say the biggest one for me is to trust myself. And a lot of us, Michelle talked about how women, we don't speak up about things. We also sometimes second guess ourselves and have imposter syndrome, or think, I don't know about this, or somebody will say, well, this isn't a good idea, this isn't good, and we'll just let it go. I have learned that, I know more than I think I do. So I always say, trust yourself. You know more than you think you do. If you're a spiritual person at all, you can align with that intuition, that voice, source that's in you that knows more than we know, and it's here to guide us. And we have to listen to our inner guidance system. And so if you were given an idea, if something came to you in the corporate environment, if you feel strongly about something, keep going with that. Do not second guess yourself. Trust yourself. You know what's best. Even if you're like, how do I even know this? You know it. Trust yourself, and it'll get you really far.
And Nikki?
Yeah, I'll say the biggest lesson learned, and this is a little bit selfish because I'm a former athlete, my sons and my husband, everybody's athletes, so we have a bias for sports, but it's around intellectual athleticism. I think about like Serena Williams, right? When she wins a Grand Slam, she doesn't just stop and go, hang her tennis racket on display and sit down somewhere. She's probably practicing that very next day. You have to continue to train, continue to learn, and continue to practice. It is all about, especially as a technology professional, it is all about intellectual athleticism. The moment you rest on your laurels is the moment you kind of fall into this land of expertness. And that's the first symptom to a downward spiral. Like, you cannot consider yourself an expert in anything. Michelle touched on this, Dawn touched on this. You have to know, what are you good at? What are your core competencies? Where can you continue to learn? And being open and willing to pull those folks in. So just intellectual athleticism is like paramount for me.
Thank you, Nikki. And Michelle?
You've been giving me so many good words to use. Intellectual athleticism.
I
got pie. I got what's that? Elmo. I got intellectual athleticism. I'm gonna throw these all around. So thank you.
Oh God, it's amazing. So
we got to add the quotes now. We have quoted by. We got to make sure we give the credit, because we're not getting in trouble later, Nikki. We'll make sure it goes to the right place.
Use away.
So Michelle, have you had any what lessons learned have you learned on this journey?
Yeah, one thing I'll say is, even though it's funny, especially coming after the intellectual athleticism, allow yourself downtime and avail the time to just forgive yourself for not being able to do everything. Very high functioning folks who are very driven, do that poorly. And your body and your mind and your spirit and your family and whatever else will take the hit for that. I remember, like, with all the things that went on in 2020, it was really funny. You're the only, and like when things were happening, and I am a consulting CTO for a company in Nigeria, and they had horrible unrest right around the time we were having a lot of things. And so I was, back and forth with all these things. And a really good friend that's also a coworker said, we're part of one of the ERGs. She's like, I just need, some of the senior leaders to pop in. I said, I don't have it in me today. Today is not that day. Today, I need to take care of my child, who is a 15-year-old boy, and my 19-year-old nephew, and I got to be there for them. So today I tap out. Today, I actually need to take care of this and get my work done. and I can be available. And they were, that is the grace of actually having, we're lucky, we got a few other VPs that are Black that can actually stand it. But I could say to them, I said, I can't today. Like legitimately, I can't do this and take care of them and take care of myself and do that. And you have got to be able to do that. We do not do that enough. And then it has such an impact on you. So I would say, give yourself grace, give yourself time, give yourself that downtime so that you can rebuild, you can rejuvenate, so that you can go on the next day.
Anyone else want to add anything to that? Okay, so another question I just want to ask, what do you think are some of the biggest obstacles holding back Black women in technology? And I'll start off with you, Nikki.
Beyond sort of some of the systemic obstacles, I think it's some of the stuff Dawn talked about, some of the things that most, my career, Michelle's career, we've probably seen in the corporate environment. So I won't recap those. I think if I'm taking an introspective sort of approach, I think there's this obsession sometimes with perfection, right? Always believing that we have to be perfectly ready for a role or the next role, or assuming that if we just perform, that everything's going to perfectly fall in place. We have to get out of this like obsession with being perfect, because, and you touched on it, Michelle, the people who don't look like us, they can have 10% of the capability and 90% of the confidence, and they will sell themselves into a role like nobody's business, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. We just have to understand there's nothing wrong with that, and it's okay for us to do the same. Now, I'm not saying, pursue things that you're not qualified for, but don't feel like you have to be perfect before you are even considered for that next opportunity or even pursuing a career in tech if it's a pivot for you.
Absolutely. I really second that as well. And Michelle, some of the obstacles holding back Black women in the technology industry.
That's probably the biggest, and they've actually done studies on it too, which is they did this study where I used to have it. I used to keep it because I would send it out a lot, where they had a job, essentially a role, and they did a test, kind of like an A/B test. Like women, when they looked at the role, they said, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that. Dudes actually clicked all of them and just sent in their resume. They didn't check to the number of years or whatever. And when they went back and asked, because then they would ask folks, well, why did you go ahead and do it? The guys would actually say, well, I still can do it. They don't need all those things. Or if they do, I can figure that out. And women would say, but it asked for this. And because it asked for it and I don't have it specifically. But if you talk to them, they'd have something similar. They wouldn't substitute. They wouldn't say, oh, that's equivalent to probably this, so I can probably do it. So, that is one thing. So you can't have this one for one. If it feels a little uncomfortable, you probably should go for it. Like it feels like you're gonna cry the first day of work, probably don't go for that one. But like just a little bit of discomfort, that's probably okay. The other thing is I get asked by more and women of color, so this is not just Black women, how to be more mature or this. So what that means to me, and I've spent a lot more time kind of peeling the onion, is how do I act more like them? That's not gonna work. You have to be okay in your skin. And when you go into interviews, when you go into companies, not everybody is worthy of you, your time, and any of that. Sometimes that's the answer. Sometimes the answer is, this is not the place for me. But sometimes the answer is, this is the place for me for now. What am I going to get out of it? And then what I'm going to do and take from that to go and grow. That you have to look, you always have to look at those roles. You always have to look at those things. You always have to look at, it's okay to say, what do I get out of this? And then how is that going to help me in this next thing? We have to be okay with that. That there's nothing wrong with those types of questions and actually doing that, because it's going to get you to the next thing.
Absolutely. And Dawn, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, definitely echoing the things that Nikki and Michelle said, because it does apply to entrepreneurship as well. But I go back to just imposter syndrome, lack of just having that confidence that you belong there. I do a lot of coaching with entrepreneurs. And I had a call actually last night with a young lady, and she started the call off and said, I'm not really qualified to do what I'm doing. And then she led into an amazing, mind-blowing presentation. I mean, I was like, oh my God, I want to invest my money into what you're doing. But she set the tone like, well, I'm not really qualified for this. And she was just very timid and not confident. And then when I seen what she did, I was like, girl, you sitting on a gold mine. So I think it's just like, it doesn't matter if you have never done what you're trying to do, you can still do it. And you don't need prior qualifications. If you did something today, just for the first time, you've done it, you're qualified. And that's what I always, that's what I always tell people. When I got my first job in tech as a business development analyst for Nationwide, and I got that job as an intern when I was working on the intranet in 2000. And I seen a job posting and it said internal candidates only. And it had all these requirements. You have to have 5 years. I was a 21-year-old intern and I still applied because I was like, I can do this. And I got the job. And they were like, you really shouldn't even be applying this. I got reprimanded for applying for the job that I got. So that's what told me, like, I'm doing what I want to do. Like, and that's that mentality you have to have, and the attitude that you have to have. It's like my mom always would say, which maybe she shouldn't have told me this, but it's like, ask for forgiveness later. Don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness later. Do what you got to do. And the same thing in entrepreneurship. I think that what holds us back is not having confidence and not realizing that our skills are transferable. You don't have to be sitting at the computer coding to be a tech CEO. None of that. All the skills that we have are transferable into tech. You just take those skills, whether it's marketing, HR, finance, to a technology company, and you're now in tech with the skills and passions that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of it's confidence and self-belief and just being self-assured, which you see in a lot of men, even if they don't have the qualifications. So this is a very kind of open-ended question. What advice would all of you give your younger self? And I'll start off with you, Michelle.
Well, my younger self wouldn't have listened, so I don't know that I would have my younger self. I like the question. I think it's cute, but I know what I was like, so it's kind of okay. What I try to say though is so I always phrase this: what did I not know? What I didn't know is I'd always been raised, my family had rules. Like I could draw. They were like, too bad, you're going to college for something else. Like you had to find something else. They had a whole career plotted for me. I still make fun of my dad. He was wrong. But, like they had a whole plan plotted for me. And I remember listening to my parents and taking what they asked and still kind of, very respectfully, plotting my own way. And actually having those conversations with my father, which is, I know you don't understand this, but this is what this is like. This is why it's okay for me to leave this job and I'm not going to be here 20 years. That was something he couldn't fathom. This is how we are paid. We're incentivized differently. And having those conversations. So there is something to be said with charting your own path, failures and all. The failures were the best, because I got to be honest, if I hadn't failed at those things, I don't know where I would be. I would have probably been in something I didn't enjoy as much, and I would find something new. And I'm like, oh, that wasn't what I like. So just be okay with failure and know that you don't have to know everything right now. You can figure it out along the way.
Absolutely. I'll ask you, and actually, if anyone has any questions, I mean, we've only got a few more minutes left, but if I see a really good question come up, I will ask that as well. So if anyone's got a question, please type it in the chat. Dawn, I'll ask you that as well. What advice would you give your younger self?
You know what? I was just thinking about that. First of all, I probably wouldn't listen at all because I didn't listen to nothing that they said either. Yeah. But I would really tell myself that being the outlier, the outcast, the black sheep, someone that, was going against everything, that's okay to work out, because that was the story of my life, and it was not accepted when I told my black parents that I went to college, I got a corporate job, and I'm quitting after 8 months to start a website. They didn't understand what the hell I was doing. You're gonna do a website? What is this? Yeah. What do you mean? Like, nobody took my business seriously, even though I was making money. And my family really, I was the outcast. They were not proud of me. They thought I was throwing my life away by being an entrepreneur. And it was a hard 10 years of just trying to find my way and trusting myself that what I was doing was going to turn out to be something. And I would tell my younger self to keep going. I'm proud of my younger self because I love my life where it is today. And it's really the decisions that my 20 and 30-year-old self made that put me where I am today. So everyone that's listening, it's okay to be the outcast. If people don't believe in you, just show them. Just be quiet and just do the work and just show them.
Absolutely. And Nikki, anything to add?
Yeah, so I have a different background. I grew up mostly in homeless shelters and foster care, probably the first 10, 15 years of my life, off and on. And so the advice I would have for myself, which is what I remind myself of to this day, is you are enough. You don't need to come from a privileged background or decorated family. Your ability to learn, to be curious, to try and not be afraid of failure, and to be a kind, good person, that is enough. And there's a quote that I always think about from James Baldwin, that the place in which I'll fit will not exist until I make it. And for me, that just means I have to normalize constantly a person like me, who comes from a background like me, being in a place where I'm considered not belonging. And that's okay. So I remind myself, I would have told my younger self this, and I remind my older self this all the time: you are enough.
Okay, I love that. That is just amazing. So I now I'm going to talk a little bit about history, because I think we're actually in a really kind of pivotal time in history. Obviously, last year was crazy, as we all know. And we're now seeing record numbers of women in high-profile leadership roles, like the vice president. What are your thoughts about this? I mean, do you think that this will actually change, people's perception of Black women in leadership positions? And I'll start off with you, Michelle.
Sort of, like it's like it always is. We thought having a Black president changed certain things. Some things, but what I will say is, so I've done a lot of volunteering for different tech organizations and things like that. And part of the reason I have done it, and I hate public speaking. I usually don't do panels. I have one rule, which is Black History Month. You got to be Black to ask me to join something. Otherwise, everybody else. So Dennis, be happy, because I told everybody else no this month. You have to have. There's some rules. I have a set of rules, and that is my way of actually making sure that I'm giving back to the right folks. But I think what's interesting is people you just need to become normalized to some degree. So yes, to some degrees, yes, seeing that will be a good thing for the people who look like that, who didn't know it was possible. For everybody else, it's no different than it was the day before. That's the truth of it. I am a good inspiration for young girls, children, people who look like me, who didn't know you could be a technologist or all these things and still be Black. And when my girlfriend said still be normal, like just be myself. But for everybody else, they weren't really concerned about it. So it doesn't really change their perception.
Okay. And Nikki?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's empowering. I cry watching Kamala get sworn in, but the reality of it is, we're 55 years since the Civil Rights Movement or Civil Rights Act. And just the other day, Ken Frazier announced, that he's stepping down from his role as CEO of Merck. And so we're back to approximately 1.8% of top executives in Fortune 50 companies being people who are Black or brown. So that to me, while I'm inspired by what I see on an American stage or a global political stage, I still know the reality is there is a lot of work to do. And so, but the good thing is there are people like me, there are people like Dawn and Michelle and everybody else on this call who understand that, and we have to just leverage the roles and the positions that we're in to help move the needle forward and lean into those conversations. I told my team yesterday, we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So if that means we're going to have some conversations about some things we never had conversations about before, let's do it, right? But yeah, I don't think there's going to be this significant change unless we all work as a multiplier effect to kind of impact it.
And Dawn, do you have any thoughts?
I don't have any additional thoughts to answer the questions beautifully, but I was also taking some time to answer some of our
Yes, please.
questions that they were asking in the chat. So there are a few questions. If you click on the Q&A, Michelle and Nikki, there's some questions for you ladies on the Q&A. So I would love just for to engage
Absolutely.
the audience a bit more. I mean, I'll answer like 4 questions, but they asked some really good questions to Nikki and Michelle. So I don't want to talk any more about things. I want to make sure they get what they wanted to get out of this.
Absolutely. I did see a question, actually. It's an interesting one, which I'll ask anyway. Have any of the panelists had to deal with being undercut by other women that look like you? So I think what this question is really asking is, have you ever had some challenging moments with other Black women, and how have you dealt with it?
I haven't. I just, you know what? I appreciate this panel because I rarely talk to people that are in corporate. Like, I feel like I'm so like in another world. And I mean, it's amazing hearing the statistics about the percentage of executives and reading in the chat about the workforce. Like, I have so much respect for Nikki and Michelle to just being in that environment, because for me, I'm in tech as a founder. And like I said, it's been years I've been in tech, and it was a small group of us. So we couldn't be against each other. We couldn't undercut each other. We were really all we got. We say we all we got. It's a couple of Black women, and we have to stick together. You know, you got to like me, because we got to be each other's advocates. And I'm a part of a group called Visible Figures, started by a founder, Stephanie Lampkin of Blendor. And she created a group of just Black female founders who have raised money. And now we have this whole community called Visible Figures, because we said hidden figures no more, you know? And so Black women have lifted me up in my career. I don't have any experiences like that. So I welcome everyone. Someone in the groups in the chat said, you know, you're having a hard time finding jobs, or come over to the startup world. You know, startups have raised a lot of money, and we're hiring. My team makes market salary. They're not like struggling. They're making salary. They're getting benefits. They're getting equity. They're getting treated right. So definitely consider taking your talents to a startup. It's really hard. We're always hiring. I'm always looking for great people. I'm always looking to steal an amazing talent from a corporation who's not appreciating what you do. I'm looking at Michelle like, CIO, I'm about to take her. Okay, Nikki, I'm about to come take you, or tell somebody to come take you from these people. You know, so startups have money. And I think that everyone should look into just exploring working with startups.
Okay, I've got another question, actually. It's for you, Nikki. It says you've worked at a company for a very long time. How did you know when it was time to go?
Yeah, so I started at Boeing as an intern. So I spent so much time there, right? Essentially my entire career. I knew it was time to go when my desire to learn something new and my curiosity just no longer was being, fed the way that I needed it to be fed. I started to fall into that expert syndrome. Like, I know everything about airplanes. I know everything about technology within airplanes and within the manufacturing industry, and knowing how much runway I had left to do incredible things and hopefully pivot to some of the things in Dawn's space, I knew that I needed to get a little bit more industry exposure and industry expertise. So it was just a strategic play. I never intended to go from cradle to grave in one place.
Absolutely. And let me see if there are any other questions as well. Michelle mentioned when speaking with people who were asking her to sponsor mentor, they don't always come back with homework she gave. What do you as a sponsor or mentor expect from people that you would be willing to give your time to?
One is knowing what you want to do. And I don't mean exactly what you want to do, but having some idea. I want to learn more about this. I actually have people randomly come to me and just say, I want to do what you do. That's not going to work. So I will go back and say, okay, what do you think I do? That's where you start all the questions. But if I have to keep asking all these questions, I'm not sure you need me yet. Like, I'm not sure you need my time. So having some idea of what it is you see, like they could even tell me like what they saw that's important, or what they want to learn, something they saw I actually did that they'd like to learn better. That, and then I will tell you, I had a mentor do this to me, by the way. I went to he was our CEO, and he's still, like, he's retired, and I still talk to him periodically. He's very annoying. And I went to him and I said, I want you to be my mentor. And he was like, what does that mean? Like, and we didn't have video calls, so it was just real quiet on the phone. I was like, but I had an answer. I was like, I gave him an example. I said, when you walked into our room, you engaged with people and you had a true conversation. I heard you listen. You came up with questions. I don't know how to do that. I want to learn to do that. And I was the first person he'd actually ever said yes to for a mentor, because he said, You didn't just say, I want to do what you do. You literally asked me, you picked an example, said, I don't know how to do that. I would love to learn how. And so that's what I expect when folks come to me too, is like, what is it? It may not be me, it may be something or someone that I send you to somebody else that's better at something, but that's what I expect usually.
All right then, thank you so much. I know we didn't get a chance to answer all the questions. I would say if anyone's got a question specifically for me, please go through to Dennis and see if he can filter them through me. So sorry we can answer the questions, but I think this has been an amazing, informative, insightful discussion. So I just want to thank all the speakers for their insight, and also applaud all of you as well for what you've achieved, which is amazing in your own right. And audience, thank you. This was a really full house. So really appreciate all of you turning up, and I hope this has been a very informative discussion for all of you. Thank you so much.
And thank you all. I learned so much, and I would love to have any of you back for an individual webinar or presentation, whatever you guys want to do, just let me know. And really quickly, Greg, did you want to say anything before we close?
No, it was fine. I wish I'd got to a few more questions, but it was fine.
Okay.
I think people seem really engaged. I mean, there was a lot of movement.
Very engaged. A lot of questions still that were out there. So I mean, happy if anything was directed towards me, Dennis and Greg, I'm happy to, you can connect me later. I'm happy to just answer them and send them out for you if it's something significant.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Well, thank you all. I appreciate the time, and everyone have a good rest of the night.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.